Michael, I cannot get Richard. Richard, you there?
I'm here.
Okay, we got you. Sorry about that. Quick tech issue there. Now, we had you on when you announced your campaign a few months ago. Of course, in this early stage, a big thing is fundraising, right? And kind of laying the groundwork. How so far has it gone?
It's going fantastic, John. Raised a significant amount of money, reached out and talked to a whole lot of folks, a lot of voters in the district, getting fantastic feedback, and I'm going to carry a ton of momentum into the ground game coming up in the spring and summer.
Now, when you say ground game, how to define that for our audience? You know, we kind of hear these political machine terms tossed around, like getting you out to vote and ground game, but in a district like the 6th, which is pretty geographically, it's humongous. When you say ground game, describe what that means.
Ground game is figuring out where you can actually walk door to door and meet the actual voters. As you say, the 6th is massive geographically. The Eastern Shore, there are a number of pockets that you can walk door to door and actually talk to voters. But the vast majority of the geography up there, you can't. Similarly, in Matthews County, there are pockets that you can walk, but not all of it. Norfolk is different. You can walk just about every single door in the entire district that's in Norfolk and Virginia Beach. A second component to ground game is a phone outreach. Just me on the phone, staff members, volunteers on the phone, reaching out to voters, figuring out what's on their minds, and trying to address their problems as best we can. So it's ground game really is direct voter contact, and that's vital. Today, in today's political world, most folks don't even know who their legislators are, much less have ever had the opportunity to talk to them one-on-one, and that's something I'm going to change.
I think that's so essential because what you get so much today, Richard, is TV ads, and you get a lot of different things. And a lot of people say, well, you have to have a great digital strategy. I was at some meeting. I was at Curtis Colgate, chairman of the 2nd Republican Congressional District, had an outreach meeting in Virginia Beach on Saturday. That was, by the way, was fabulous. He had about 150 people come out for that. And, they were talking about how the Republicans, in order to be effective, they have to get a better digital strategy. Nobody ever mentions what you just said, which is going out one-on-one, knocking on doors and meeting people and talking to them into their homes, right?
That's exactly right. And don't get me wrong, we've got a great digital strategy, and we will be reaching out digitally, but that's a small piece of the puzzle. It's the personal contact. I mean, this is a state legislative seat. This is not U.S. Senate or Congress where you just never expect to see the folks. I got to get out, and I want to get out and talk to folks one-on-one. It's absolutely vital to our process here in Virginia.
Richard, when you're out knocking on doors now, and I know you've started the campaign, what are people saying?
John, it is the same message that we've heard year in, year out, decade in, decade out. People want solid economy. They want jobs. They want good schools. It's pretty simple. And unfortunately, I think that the political process has lost its way on providing the most basic things that folks want. Folks want a solid future for them and their kids. They want to know that they will have a retirement, and they want a good quality of life. And I think that our politicians today have forgotten that. They get so caught up in the partisan gamesmanship, and they get so off track. They forget the basics. And that's what I want to focus on in my campaign. And when I get to Richmond, that's what I'm going to focus on. Diversifying the economy, bringing good jobs to the entire 6th District and the entire Commonwealth, and focusing on our schools. Everybody knows that if we don't have good schools, no new company is going to want to come to town. Mm-hmm. They just don't want to. They don't want to bring workers here whose kids can't get a good education. On the backside of that, companies don't want to come to town if they know that they're not going to have skilled workers.
Right.
And if we don't have good basic public education, we're not going to get the skilled workers. They're going to fill the jobs that a new company would need.
We're chatting with Richard Ottinger, Republican candidate for State Senate, District 6. That's in the Eastern Shore area and parts of Norfolk, and I think one precinct in Virginia Beach, seat currently held by Democrat State Senator Linwood Lewis from the Eastern Shore. Richard, we're now to the end of this session. There's about 4 or 5 days remaining. I know you've kind of been studying what's going on. Can you chronicle for us, if you were in the state Senate during this 2015 session in lieu of Linwood, what would you have voted on that is in contrast from Senator Lewis?
Well, John, the biggest issue that I've seen in reviewing Mr. Lewis's record is not so much this year. I think he's scared. He's tacked to the right. But the biggest example is, and it's something of a twofer, is last year's budget vote. Mr. Lewis originally was the only Democrat to vote for the budget, and if you recall, the budget that was passed put limitations on the expansion of Medicaid. So Linwood first votes for it, and then in a correction, votes against it the next day. And the excuse offered up by his people, he didn't actually speak to it directly, but his people said that he had pushed the wrong button. And that raises a number of issues. First, here's Mr. Lewis, who's was in the House for a decade before he moved up to the Senate, and if he's being truthful and doesn't know which button is yes and which button is no, we've got some real basic fundamental issues. On the other side, what I think actually happened is that he got wishy-washy. That there were some items in the budget that he wanted, in particular some money for Wallops Island, but then he felt some heat from his caucus and backtracked and attempted to vote no. Mm-hmm. That, to me, is the biggest example of something that, number one, I would have done completely differently, given the state of Medicaid expansion and the issues with the existing Medicaid system in Virginia. I would have voted for the budget, meaning I would have voted for limitations on the Medicaid expansion, but I would have stood up and said it out loud and taken ownership of my vote.
Okay, but we can't really read into his mind. I mean, he's saying that he just made a mistake, so I mean, you have to kind of take that on face value. I know where you're coming from. It does look a little duplicitous, and because he was in a swing district, I could see the conclusion that you might draw. But, you know, this happens. There's other examples where people have hit the wrong button on both sides of the aisle. And what he has said is that he legitimately he legitimately voted no. But I do see where you're coming from, because it only passed, it passed by enough with or without him. So maybe after it passed, he changed it. I don't know. Now, let's get to some of the issues now. Let's go to Frank Wagner's Dominion Power Bill freezing rates. If you were in the Senate, how would you have voted on that?
John, I would have voted for the freezing of rates. I was actually in Richmond and got to listen to the bulk of the committee hearing on the issue, and the vast majority of speakers who addressed the committee were speaking in favor of it. And those speakers ran the gamut from the what you'd expect to be the typical sort of Republican Manufacturers Association folks all the way to the NAACP folks. And they presented a number of different arguments for why that bill is a good bill. And cost control for the most vulnerable sector of our society was the most moving of those reasons. So I was overwhelmed by the support for the bill, and if I had been in the Senate, I would have voted for it.
What about the Tebow bill?
I would have voted for the Tebow bill. I think that folks who choose to homeschool, who are taxpayers, should have the opportunity to have their kids participate in public school sports. That to me is something of a no-brainer. They're paying taxes for it. I don't see a real downside to it. If folks want to choose to educate their kids at home, that's their choice. But they should have the opportunity to have their kids have a full educational sports opportunity in the public school system.
Majority Leader Kirk Cox in the House has a bill now that still hasn't made its way all the way through for a vote in the Senate, which basically is going to put limitations on the amount that colleges can charge students for extra fees for scholastic activities, with the tuition rising, the number of student loan debt that we have. Kirk Cox and some Republicans say, these fees have gotten out of hand. What say you?
Well, I agree with Kirk on that issue. However, I don't believe that he had the full picture when he crafted the bill. Most particularly locally, that bill would have an inordinate negative effect on Old Dominion and Old Dominion's ability to fund what I think is a fantastic sports program. Now, that being said, we have got to, in the bigger picture, figure out a way to control the costs of secondary education. It is absolutely ballooning. We've got to keep it under control, or else the folks who pay taxes in Virginia will not be able to afford to send their kids to in-state public institutions, and that's just not right.
Chap Peterson, senator from Fairfax, had several bills in that dealt with privacy and restoring some of liberties back to Virginians. Let's get to the driver's license reader bill. What did you think of that?
I am a huge supporter of privacy rights. I don't think that our government needs to be keeping any more information than absolutely necessary, and it ought not to keep information outside of a specific need in a specific instance. So privacy rights are very important to me.
Convention of States.
I've got some concerns with Convention of States. I don't doubt that the folks favoring Convention of States have great intentions. My concern is when you open the door to potential changes that you just can't anticipate, you're really asking for more problems than you can expect. And I think that opening the door is a dangerous possibility. So I'm open to being convinced otherwise, but at this point, I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay, that is the exact same position that I have. So I have to say I agree with that down to the final wording. Okay, let's get to the budget situation. Right now, we got a little bit of a surplus based on revenues went up a little bit. Would you be in favor of putting that in the rainy day fund or spending it somewhere else?
Well, as I understand it, some of the folks that state government employees, teachers, are slated for pay raises, which they haven't received in a number of years. I'm fully in support of that. But whatever remainder should go in the rainy day fund. And more importantly, I think that we ought to be looking, since we do have an excess this year, we ought to be looking at places to cut, and give some of that money back to the taxpayers. If we don't need it, we should be giving it back.
Mountain Valley Pipeline.
Absolutely in favor of it. We in Virginia have got to do everything we can to attract new business, to encourage development, diversification of our economy, and the energy needs of new business demand that we have a sufficient supply of natural gas. And if we don't have it, again, companies won't come here. So while I am a proponent of property rights, and I do have some concerns about takings, I think in this situation it is, in my view, a no-brainer. I think we really have to do it.
Okay, you're exactly on target with that issue. We're almost out of time. Richard Ottinger, if people want more information or they want to get involved in your campaign or volunteer sign up, where do they go?
They go to www.ottingervirginia.com, and they can find out all the information they want about how to get in touch with the campaign if they have specific questions. There's also information on there about my bio, background, and my view on some basic issues.